2.0.
Yes, and that's the whole problem. You already have a health ministry. You already have UNICEF. You have all these other institutions like USAID is in Afghanistan. USAID. You have all these charities. They already exist. Why is it so difficult to use the current existing organizations to just organize and have teams to act, and we don't have time to create new bureaucracies now. You don't create a new...
It's wasting valuable time.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen the way that this virus proliferates, especially in the UK.
Yeah.
Every day that's lost. And over here, at least the UK has, the NHS, free healthcare, but in Afghanistan, it's the response has been very bad, and that isn't just exclusive to the government, because there isn't actually a ceasefire in place as well.
Yeah.
Both sides are still formally at war with each other.
Yeah.
And that's obviously complicating effects. Is the violence that's currently being waged between the Taliban and the government, is that at a reduced level relative to what we saw before the peace deal? What is that looking like? What is the Taliban's public stance on the virus? Because I know that they have tried to, have some sort of a response to the virus, but if there's still a war going on, what good are the other efforts?
Yeah, there was a recent report about a number of civilian casualties, and in that report, basically, if you compare the data of the casualties of war from the beginning of 2020 until now, so if you compare that to 2019, so if you compare that to the first quarter of 2019, there is a reduction. Okay? There is some reduction.
So
however, yes.
Okay.
However, the problem is like, if the Taliban continue their attacks and they continue their bombings, etc., what happens is like, people need to travel right now. During this pandemic, aid supplies, food supplies need to travel back and forth from different parts of the country. So when there's fighting, when there are, it hinders that. One. Two, when the people know that there is a possibility of an attack, an explosion, or whatever, they will ask higher prices for food, for transportation, for supplies, because the demand becomes higher and the supply is going down. So the fact that Taliban continue fighting, it has so many levels of problems that it creates. They can say on their Facebook pages and Twitter, look, we have anti-corona, which also seems like they're doing something. But the truth is that under current circumstances, all these efforts of combating corona without stopping fighting, they're just useless. It doesn't make any sense.
So is this something that we can? Is the fact that fighting has persisted? Is this something that the Taliban are responsible for, or the government? Because both of these organizations are claiming to be the rightful representatives of Afghans. Who is responsible?
Afghans and the Taliban. I think the U.S. government has a direct link.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, the U.S. government can exert a lot of pressure on Kabul that no one else can.
Not only Kabul and Taliban. I think they have now forwarded their friendship hands towards them and allowed them to come to the negotiation table. And they already knew that the peace agreement was between the Taliban and the Americans, and not the Afghans and Taliban, not the Afghan government.
Yeah.
Taliban. So they already knew that there's going to be an ongoing conflict between the Afghans and Taliban group. So for me, it's the interesting point for me is that the group is claiming to be fighting for Islam in Afghanistan. This is the month of Ramadan. They're not killing, as they were calling their American allies, infidels, but they're killing their own people. They're killing their own Muslims. They're killing Afghans, innocent Afghans, and they're not attacking the U.S. Forces anymore because they have an agreement, and because they don't have an agreement with Afghan government, so it's allowed for them to kill them, allowed to kill soldiers, allowed to kill innocent people, attack, etc. And I had a quite couple of months ago, one of the Talibs, they just commented on one of my tweets and then said that Talibans are not responsible for the burning of the schools. Talibans are not responsible for this and that. We are peaceful. All of these is propaganda, etc.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, so who is creating this propaganda? What is the reality? It's a political game that is, we don't know the outcome of the agreements. We don't have the content of the agreement. The only people who are suffering because of all these parties is the Afghan people.
Or the people that they're claiming to represent.
Exactly, all the people that they're claiming to represent. And I think, I think Afghan people has to have a voice. People have the right to make political, economic decisions for themselves and for their country, and that had to be the main agenda of Americans when they went to Afghanistan, because they claimed that they were going to provide these necessities for and these opportunities for Afghans, because it was missing in the past. But they haven't created it. Women haven't got voice. People haven't got any rights to take part in political or economic decisions of the country. People are not being discussed. The peace agreements is not being discussed with people, representatives. We don't know what the peace agreement might be. We don't even know what the peace agreement is between the Afghan government and Taliban, let alone the Taliban and the Americans.
I'm glad you mentioned in particular the women's issue. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago. It was about COVID, but when we hear about the U.S. invasion in the last 19 years, a lot of the times we'll hear about advances in healthcare and advances in education. The article is on AfghanEye.org. I don't remember the statistic exactly, but I believe it was the maternity mortality rate in Afghanistan is 1,291 per 100,000 live births. Now, in the UK, I believe the number is about 12 per 100,000. In Pakistan, which is more developed than Afghanistan relatively, but still not at the same level of the UK, it's 260 per 100,000. So our maternal mortality rate is about 6 times greater than Pakistan, 5 or 6 times greater than Pakistan. So this just shows you that, yes, there have been advances made in healthcare, but Afghanistan in 2001 was at literal zero. It was at literal zero. So saying that we've gone from 0 to 2 or 0 to 3 in the last 19 years is not really an achievement, because you've got hundreds of billions of dollars that you have to, use those and put everything under the magnifying glass. The results aren't really tangible. And obviously, once again, we come back to corruption, right? One of the reasons of this is corruption. Going forward, this 540 million US dollars that have been donated by the IMF and the World Bank and whoever, is it realistic to expect that in these exceptional circumstances this money will be put to good use, will reach the people it needs to reach, or is it going to be the same game? What do we say?
Well, we've witnessed many other issues, natural disasters in the past, and people have communities have helped as well with the great amount of money and fundings. I don't think they have reached those people, and I don't think that this is going to reach them as well, unless the international communities have to force the government, because now the health of the Western world depends on the poor countries' people's health as well. So we are all connected into this pandemic, and if you don't deal with the coronavirus in Afghanistan or in Pakistan or in China or in India or in other part of the world, it's going to affect the Western civilization as well. So they have to impose. They have to force the governments to deal, and they are going to provide funds. They have to deal with this pandemic because they are in lockdowns, and they don't want to be in lockdown more because Afghanistan is suffering of a coronavirus because the government cannot provide the adequate services.